Hi, folks. My name is Byron Komanek, owner and manager of Jack Solar Garden and the director of the Colorado Agrivoltaic Learning Center. You have joined us today for a webinar on fire safety. We appreciate your interest in agrivoltaics, in learning more about how we can have safe solar arrays with in concerns to the spread of fire. I'm going to go through a little bit about what the Colorado Agrivoltaic Learning Center is, what we provide, and then we'll jump into the webinar. So, the Colorado Agrivoltaic Learning Center spends the majority of its time showcasing agrivoltaics, helping people better understand and appreciate the possibilities that agrivoltaics, being that coupling of agriculture within solar arrays, how it could be beneficial to our rural communities for rural livelihoods, as well as climate resiliency for agricultural purposes. We do this through a variety of different means. We hosted a conference in February of 2026. Stay tuned for a 2027. We have kids education programs where we bring kids out onto site so that they get to learn about solar plus agriculture, and we even go to their schools and help support them in learning more about how they could plan their own agrivoltaic related projects later on in the future. We've hosted a variety of different types of workshops where we bring cows underneath the solar panels so folks can understand how it's possible to integrate cattle and other types of livestock within them. We host parties. We have a program where we connect folks that are interested in land access to existing solar arrays so that we can promote more agricultural activities occurring within even our existing solar arrays, whether or not they're actually built for it. And lastly, if you haven't seen the movie Save the Farm, Save the Future, it's a documentary that we had published last year. It's a lot of fun, free on YouTube. We also spend a significant amount of time helping our state and local government partners from different state agencies here in Colorado to various counties. We have published land use code guidance for deploying agrivoltaics in Colorado. If you take a quick screenshot, you can grab that website link there at the bottom. And we bring out our government friends for workshops here on the farm so that they get an opportunity to see it for themselves, understand what's possible, walk within the solar array. And it's always interested me how few people have ever been in a solar array, even though they know about it and talk about it. Discussing agrivoltaics is important because shade's important, especially out here in the western part of the United States. It's getting hotter, it's getting drier. We have the lowest snowpack on record in Colorado right now, and that's going to be hard for our irrigation of our lands. Having shade on the ground keeps that moisture locked in the ground longer, providing opportunity for vegetation to grow better. I just outside my solar array, which is only 300 feet away from here, the grass growing inside of our solar array is doing much better, looking almost like what you see in this picture compared to my open fields, where it's dry and hasn't started growing much at all yet. It's also important because various governments around the country are taking note. Different organizations that support counties and our state agencies are either creating grant programs or passing legislation or coming up with their new land use codes that will have an impact on how solar gets developed on farmlands. And what we would like to do is see that there's more agrivoltaic considerations put in place in code and at legislative levels so that folks understand the opportunity for integrating agriculture within solar arrays appropriately. If you're interested in resources from the Colorado Agrivoltaic Learning Center, go check it out online. We also have public tours every other Saturday. So if you're out here in Colorado, or if you're going to be visiting, take a look at our events link. We also have an event on May 30th out here on the farm, a community event. We'll have some bluegrass, I think we'll have a couple of distilleries doing some pours, and then we'll have, it'll be a bring your own picnic too. But on to today's webinar. Joining us today, we have Chief Fire Marshal Dave Lowrey from Boulder Fire Rescue, just a 15-minute drive from me. We have Gloria Edwards from the Southern Rockies Fire Science Network. We appreciate her joining today, as today is her last day at work and then retiring thereafter. And we have Paul Scherzinger with Namaste Solar, who's been working with Namaste for the over a decade on installing, maintaining the electrical equipment for solar arrays. Today we'll be talking about fire safety and solar arrays. So I want to kick it off with inviting our fire marshal Dave Lowrey to join us and provide his presentation. Just as a FYI, everyone, the chat is not available to our attendees, and when you have questions, please put them into the Q&A. If it's a simple one like how do you spell your name, we can fill that out. If it's a more complicated question, we'll have a discussion after each of our three presenters have provided their information. So the last 30 minutes of our webinar today will be dedicated towards Q&A. So make sure you stock up on questions for our panelists to be able to discuss. All right, I'm going to stop share and pass it off to our fire marshal.
All right. Let's see. And I got to click the share button, I guess, right? Let me know that should be happening, right, Ryan?
You're good to go. Go ahead, Dave.
Okay. So I appreciate you guys having me on, and I am going to try to kind of give an insight maybe of the fire point of view of all this, which I don't know. I'm hoping, hopefully, may surprise some of you guys. To be quite honest with you, just quickly, a little background about me. I've been with Boulder Fire Rescue for 30 years now. Oh, wait a minute, Gloria, congratulations! That's so awesome. I just want to say that right now. But I've been with Boulder Fire for about 30 years, working with the codes and standards. My background is fire protection engineering, an actual degree in that field from Oklahoma State University, believe it or not. And then I thought about this. I didn't know if I was going to share this. I don't share this with many people, but I actually have 2 degrees from Oklahoma State University, and my other degree is in agriculture, believe it or not. It's actually my first degree was in agriculture before I went back and got the fire protection degree. So I love combining the two together a little bit on that particular factor. I think I owe Brian a crisp high five for inviting me on to this. But the fact of the matter is that I've gotten involved with photovoltaics for a number of years, just based on being Boulder, the city of Boulder in Colorado. We're very enthusiastic about renewable energy, and we really encourage it. And as I go along with the talk here, I hope that it comes through that I'm a big supporter of photovoltaic, to be quite honest with you. I'm not against it at all. I think it's very manageable for the fire department, is how I kind of run things and manage everything. So just so you know, this is something that I do believe in, and certainly want to see it work. Brian asked me to come on, talk a little bit about the regulations, and I'm going to talk a little bit about regulations with what we call the ground-mounted photovoltaic systems, or freestanding photovoltaic systems. Know that in the codes, at least the codes that I deal with, I'm not really aware of um, anything that specifically addresses like an agri-photovoltaic system, but they do address ground mounted and freestanding in that sense. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and I'm going to explain a little bit of code language to make sure that you guys understand what it says, and maybe even it's not you understand, it might be when you're talking with your local jurisdictional authority, that they understand that for that. To go through there. Anyway, and then I'll talk a little bit about what the fire service might be worried about, or questions that you may be getting from the fire service, or what they're asking for you to do, and maybe some conversation that you can have with them. Full disclosure, I'm just one authority having jurisdiction out there. I cannot call your authority having jurisdiction and tell them to allow this, right? They're welcome to call me and ask my opinion of it, and my information will be here at the end. But I just can't call someone for you and say, hey, so and so called and they want to do this and they want to do that, and you should let them because it's fine, right? So that's not what we do, or not what I'm allowed to do. As far as the regulations go, typically, at least speaking here about Colorado, the majority of everything in Colorado is kind of governed by the International Fire Code, the IFC. And in the International Fire Code, in Chapter 12, in Section 5 of Chapter 12, we do have a small section in there. And literally, what you see on the screen right now is everything that is written in the code about ground mounted or freestanding photovoltaic systems. And so it doesn't say much. It doesn't really address a lot of that, but there are a couple of key things that we want to talk about in here. So in the International Fire Code, that section below that I have the yellow and the purple in, that's where it kind of talks about what really it's that the code is technically requiring. So a couple of things, I'll talk about each of these real quick, what I have highlighted. It says that we need to have a clear brush-free area. Okay, so that can be interpreted a little bit, but I would tell you right now that brush-free technically does not mean vegetation free. Because if it did, we wouldn't have that second sentence in this particular code section that says brush free within 10 feet around the perimeter of the array system. And then it goes on to say that a maintained vegetative surface. Okay, so obviously brush free does not mean vegetation free, at least in the eyes of the code. That's one thing to understand. But the other thing that I highlighted in purple is to make sure that you, or really your jurisdictional authority, make sure they see that little conjunction right there that says or, or a non-combustible base, right? It doesn't, it's not and a non-combustible base, it's not a non-combustible base, is you have an option, in other words. And that's very, very important when we talk about code, is that, okay, it's saying that you're going to have a vegetative surface or a non-combustible base. So again, we have some interpretation that needs to be made here, to be quite frank with you. But I'm gonna talk about the other code out there. Now, the other code is the National Fire Protection Association, NFPA 1, right? And that is the Fire Prevention Code. Now, I personally don't have it adopted. I have the IFC adopted, along, if you're in Colorado, the majority of everyone adopts the International Fire Code. And they both have a little pros and cons about it. Like, for instance, in NFPA 1, that very first section where it talks about a clear area of 10 feet around the ground mounted, doesn't really talk about anything about what that clear area means. It's not brush free, it's not vegetation free. It doesn't say non-combustible either, though, right? So again, we're in this interpretation of you and your jurisdictional authority has to kind of look at. And the other section is, this is what I like about NFPA 1, is it says a vegetation management plan or the non-combustible. And the rest of it is pretty much the same. I really like that vegetation management plan. And I'm going to tell you why when I get back to, like, hey, when you're talking with your jurisdictional authority, here's maybe something that you want to talk to them about, and that is a vegetation management plan. Now, I would tell you, I don't have an example of a vegetation management plan. Kind of looking at the attendees in here, it looks like there's about 23 attendees here. And I think that if I ask for a vegetation management plan, we may have 23 different types of vegetation management plan. But what I would tell you is it just needs to make sense, and it needs to be something simple or understandable in that sense, or maybe that's not even the word. Maybe the word I'm looking for is manageable, to be quite honest with you, right? That when we look at that, that it's like, yeah, I think you can make sense on looking at that. Now, there are other codes that apply to photovoltaic systems. I'm not going to talk about them, like the National Electrical Code, Article 690, that some of you may be familiar with. Obviously, Paul is. But that is like the wiring method. That's how we're going to put all this together, and that's those requirements. That's a different section. We're really talking about on the NFPA 1, the Fire Prevention Code, or the International Fire Code, of what the actual code says of what needs to happen around that ground-mounted or freestanding photovoltaic system. Right. So kind of going on that just a little bit. Obviously, the picture on the left, it's vegetation free. I can't really tell about the brush if it's within 10 feet, but I think we could all kind of look at that picture and say that what we can see in the background, now that's brush, right? That's probably what we're going to consider brush. In lieu of the top right picture, which is like a grass, a pasture, a meadow, maybe if we're kind of getting acronyms in there, not acronyms, but adjectives in there of what that is. Granted, none of these pictures, well, these two are not agri-photovoltaic systems, all right? I recognize that. Just finding pictures that kind of try to meet my point of the code a little bit. But again, I would look at that and I would say, all right, are you managing the vegetation underneath that and around that photovoltaic system? And then the bottom picture obviously is an agri-photovoltaic system. And again, we'll talk a little bit about it coming up, but again, is like, what are we doing? I think things to point out is that the photovoltaic system is up much higher than a normal ground-mounted photovoltaic system. And then look at how that system is being managed underneath that photovoltaic system. So when we kind of keep that in mind as I get down to the next couple of slides of what we really talk about in the concerns of what the fire department is. Now, fires, right? I mean, when I come to my next slide or the slide after that and talk about, well, what is the fire department concerned with? Well, fires, right? Hello, right? That makes only sense to look at something like that. But technically speaking, fires that originate in photovoltaic systems, like photovoltaic systems are the cause of the fire, are actually very low. Actually, extremely low is what I would tell you. And Paul and I, we were just talking about it a little bit, and he's going to talk more about that. But they're actually very low. They really don't occur that often, right? So, yes, they can occur, right? No one's denying that they couldn't occur, but they are relatively low, right? And we could talk about causes, about there's an electrical anomaly of going through there. Something overheats, something starts to arc. You may get like, uh, rodents or something get a hold of some of the cabling. I think that's even pretty rare, to be quite honest with you. I'm not saying that's common at all. You could have a manufacturer design. I think that's even more rare that that occurs. Anything is possible. You can have building factors or installation situations. I would say the one instant that I've had here in my community was an installation. It wasn't a manufacturer issue in that one. Obviously, we have natural causes that could occur as well. Lightning, hail, windstorms, items like that that may have something occur on there. And then accidents as well. I mean, we can't control everything out there. So those, so it's not impossible to have a fire. But when you look at the overall photovoltaic industry, on buildings, off buildings, ground mounted, the probability is low, right? The probability is somewhat low. So, and typically the cause is not from the photovoltaic systems at all, right? But, again, a couple of pictures that I had from another presentation. It's not impossible to have situations occur. And this is going to kind of play in to what the concerns are of the fire department a little bit, right? We have damage to that photovoltaic system. Obviously, the picture on the left, we can see what happened, windstorm, rainstorm. I think that picture actually comes from Hawaii, to be honest with you. And then the other one is, a car ran into it. right? It's not an agri-photovoltaic system. They're up higher. I get it. I always kind of get a smile out of that because a lot of ground-mounted photovoltaic systems are mounted next to highways, right? Next to roadways and items because there's always some free space out there. And I always like, well, what possibly could go wrong mounting photovoltaic systems next to a highway, right? So again, it's not a fire concern really, it's a damage control, and some of that is going to be playing into what our concerns are, right? Well, I think when we kind of start, and this is like no particular order, by the way, but obviously, if it catches on fire, again, rare, doesn't happen that often at all, and typically it's not the photovoltaic system that has caused it, but a photovoltaic system could become involved in another fire. For agri-photovoltaic systems, a wildfire coming through that area could also start involving the photovoltaic system. That's a concern, right? And it's not something that the fire department encounters every day, right? So having that fire department understand and knowing how to handle that type of fire is kind of a critical path. Talk a little bit that here in just a second. But then, letting them know the circuitry or labeling the circuitry about what is energized, what is not energized, what's creating a shock hazard or electrical hazard to those emergency responders is a big item that we talk about. Again, not a lot of fires in the photovoltaic system, but when a building is involved in a fire and I have a photovoltaic system on the roof or on the side of that particular building, we've killed electrical power to the building, then I am very concerned about all of a sudden I still have energized circuits that my firefighters weren't aware of. Possibly I have energized circuits that they weren't aware of. Let me say it that way, right? Obviously, the concern that if it did occur in the photovoltaic system, that the fire spread to the vegetation underneath it and or around it, or then that vegetation spreads to other vegetation, like the field that Brian was just saying, that's not part of his photovoltaic system, or other structures that it could spread to, right, and amplify. Probably if I were to put these in order, eliminating, like obviously we're concerned about fire, but access to the fire, right? I mean, in order to extinguish a fire, we have to get to that particular fire in a reasonable manner. Agri-photovoltaic systems are obviously in areas that we can't easily manage to get to, can't drive to, can't get our equipment to, that we typically need to fight fire. And then water or the proper water supply would be the other thing, right? Almost everything we do involves water in some situation or some type of case. So those are kind of concerns. So with those concerns, then what are we trying? What do we need to know, or what do you, as a user, when you're talking to your local jurisdictional authority, kind of what do you need to talk to them about? Well, um, have them out and walk them through the system and kind of explain that system to them. Make sure that they really understand, hey, listen, what type do you have? And maybe Paul can elaborate more on that versus like a photovoltaic system that is known as a string system versus these photovoltaic panels have microinverters on there versus rapid shutdown, all that kind of stuff, kind of more the technical aspect of it. If they understand that, that may alleviate some of those concerns about electrical hazards and electrical shocks, right? Where are the control shutoffs, right? What do they need to know? What do they need to shut off? And what exactly are they shutting off? What circuits are going to die? What circuits are going to remain live, saying sunlight is on those panels, right? Everything needs to be identified as required by the National Electrical Code, even more identification. You can't over identify something according to the fire department, right? The more that we can see and understand what that is, then the more we can address that when we're there. And then back, and very quickly, because I'm running out of time here, back to that vegetation management plan is make sure they know that you are doing something with the vegetation. It's just not going to grow and die and become dead, brittle, ignitable material underneath there. Obviously, lastly, any other components, like are you doing in any battery storage, energy storage systems associated with it? And then if I were to put to the top of my list, make sure they know that there is a basically a subject matter expert that can either meet them or respond if something like a car ran into it or a tractor ran into it. Then they actually know that someone is on the way, an expert that can actually isolate that and know exactly what to do. That is my time. I'm going to stop sharing. That is my email. We can put it in the Q&A as well. And then I'm going to turn it back to Brian and or Gloria right now. Let me stop sharing if I can find my items here. I will do that.
I got faith in you on finding that button. Thank you very much,
I
Dave.
got it.
Appreciate
Don't
that.
worry.
And Dave's point at the very beginning of, he can't tell other fire marshals what to do in their areas if you're building a solar array somewhere else. But Dave did help me when I was working with my fire district and asked my fire district to contact Dave to have a chat. And that was useful to the building of Jack's Solar Garden. So, Gloria, I'll pass it off to you for your presentation. Thanks for being here.
All right. Hello, everyone. How's everything looking here?
Can you share a screen?
Oh, I didn't hit. Hold on. I always forget this little guy. Okay. How are we looking?
Good to go.
All righty. Thank you for having me and a great presentation, Dave. Thank you so much. As Ryan said, I'm Gloria Edwards. I'm the program director until today of the Southern Rockies Fire Science Network, and I'd like to introduce my successor, Ashley Deffron, which will be the new program director for Southern Rockies Fire Science Network. You'll be seeing her events and doing outreach for wildfire knowledge and science. So with that, and thank you, yes, this will probably be one of my, if not my very last webinar after almost 14 years on the job. So thank you for all the good wishes. And there we go. So before I get into what Southern Rockies is, just a really quick note of how Southern Rockies got connected to Calc. There's a couple steps. I'm a compulsive gardener. As you can see, that's a portion of my garden in the background there. And I hang out with all kinds of wonderful characters with the Northern Colorado Permaculture Guild, who does volunteer pop-ups, and they came over and we've done a lot of permaculture and garden improvement techniques. And here they are working on hugelkultur in their raised beds. And I'm pretty proud of those tomatoes. That was a 2.5 pounder there. So Michelle, who is right here raising her arms, works for Byron for Calc and invited me, reached out to share some wildfire information. So a lot of fun, something to do in retirement. So Southern Rockies Fire Science Network is a member of a broader nationwide network of wildfire knowledge exchange nationwide. There are 15 fire science exchanges shown on the map. The purple area right here, bordering Utah, Wyoming, and Colorado, is the Southern Rockies region, and the small purple thumbnail in the Great Plains there is the Black Hills. And these regions are loosely based on wildfire ecozones, general broad ecozones. And our mission is to facilitate the exchange of wildfire science and knowledge between researchers, managers, and communities. So we have credible information and the latest information going forward to make sound land management decisions. A little bit of zooming in on our region. This is broad vegetation types or vegetation landscapes within the Southern Rockies region, and this illustrates the variety of landscapes that we might find agrivoltaics, not just here on the Front Range, but on the Western Slope, in this Colorado Plateau High Desert Conifer area, the Wasatch Front Plateau, the Wyoming Plateau sagebrush area, the Intermountain Colorado area, the San Luis Valley, and of course the Black Hills area. And some of you, of course, maybe from out of this region, welcome. And if you are within the arid western states, we'll find a lot of similar environments. So let's move a little bit to wildfire and rangelands and grasslands broadly in the lower 48. Most people who've been watching the news are quite aware of recent fires that have become well known in grassland and rangelands and what we would have previously called unusual or unique environments. Panhandle wildfires in Nebraska, Oklahoma, Kansas, Texas. There was, I don't remember how big it got, the fire in the previous month in March in Nebraska. I think it reached 600,000 acres, if I'm correct, of rangeland. The Slave Lake wildfire, the Camp Fire in California. A lot of these case studies for grassland wildfires can be found on the Colorado State Forest Service Grassland Fire Case Studies website. There's your QR code. And of course, the Marshal fire, which has brought to attention a lot of stuff here on near and dear to us on the Front Range. So when we think of wildfires nationwide, a lot of, well, around over 90% of the media attention is to what on wildfires? Forest fires. They're large, they're dramatic, lots of glowing flame fronts. They get a lot of attention. But data shows that, and this number is probably a little more now, 56% of all wildfires burned in the lower 48 are within grasslands and rangelands. And they're the predominant wildfire. And Chief Dave might have some different data where he is, and I defer to his training and knowledge. But most municipal and private fires, the majority is responded to grasslands. And you're welcome to look up these resources. Okay, and zooming a little bit in here, the Front Range fuel types range from, we know from getting around in our area, because a lot of us like to be outdoors, from short, medium, and tall grasses, unique combinations of those fuels, to oak scrub, chaparral, conifer grass, and other mixed fuel landscapes. On the right, here's another resource showing the wildfire risk planner, the burn probability map for the state. Now, I know a lot of you may be attending from out of the state, but since we share a lot of what we call fuel model types, you will probably not be surprised to see these elevated risks in your area as well. So you can see on the Front Range here, I don't know if my mouse is showing up, but you can see on the Front Range where Denver is, this large orange area, which, can be a sobering indication, as well as the I-70 corridor and the San Luis and southwestern portion of the country. Obviously has elevated burn probability or susceptibility. So let's dial these risks in to what it means with wildfire. This is a brief chart. I'm not going to read all of it to you, and of course this is being recorded. But wildfire risks, we're putting structures out on, yes, an agricultural landscape, but Chief Dave has already shown us a variety of landscapes that can show different vulnerabilities, from nearby structures, sagebrush, nearby conifers, other infrastructure, subdivisions, etc. So we're taking these landscapes where we've excluded wildfire from the prehistoric norm and putting another infrastructure on it. So we are adding some vulnerability. And if we think about managing the vegetation and fuels around these arrays, we can liken it to a closed forest canopy that we would see in the mountains, where all the trees are touching, the sunlight is excluded from some of the ground, and we have a continuous pattern of fuel. So even if the solar array, of course, doesn't ignite itself, it can be part of a larger system where there could be continuous fuels. Vegetation is almost always the primary carrier of fire. And we can talk a little bit about fuel models as a tool that you all can use in planning. The increased risk is during the winter. In cultivation season, there's a lot more moisture because it's cultivated, it's agricultural, crops, vegetables, shade, retained moisture, livestock. But when a lot of that cultivation and water goes away in the winter, especially here on the Front Range, we have reduced plant moisture and cured grasses and shrubs, combined with wind events that we've all been experiencing. Another consideration is a lot of volunteer fire departments don't have the resources to develop proper training or hazmat suits to respond to battery fires or panels. And at the end, there's a reference to, BESS, battery or battery storage operation systems that are becoming common. So we can liken these structures to that. And there's a consideration that solar companies may have specifications on allowable understory vegetation height, which the landowner and manager would have to take into consideration. And of course, we have tons of benefits: increased moisture, rolling shade, reduced transpiration. Science is showing that yield can be as good or better. Sustainable energy resource, less stress on plants, additional income. We all know that growers need that. So a real quick slide about a couple things. In my work with Southern Rockies Network, I've worked a lot with the Great Plains and other regions, and I hear frequently, well, it's all flat, or it's just flat grass. And I've found that nothing can be further from the truth, especially in Nebraska, Flint Hills, Sand Hills, Kansas, yeah, okay, pretty flat, but we're dealing with areas, especially here on the Front Range and other areas in the Intermountain West, where terrain can be highly dissected and lots of drainages, lots of undulations and mountainous. So we are putting some infrastructure in these larger landscapes that have different dynamics with surrounding wildfire and air draw and fuel types and energy. How do we analyze this? One tool that you have would be a fuel model, a standardized description of type, amount, and arrangement of vegetation. You can access some of those to modify or take a look at your risk and recommendations with the Colorado Forest Atlas. But some of these models, there's in this tool, there's 19 different fuel models in the Colorado Wildland Risk Assessment. But these models can assume too much uniformity. And we have mountain areas that are also subject to mountain wave events, atmospheric events that come over the mountains. That's what happened in Marshall, happened recently in, March, and happened on the Lahaina fire. Grassland risk can be higher than these models can show, and fire risk can be increased by narrow ribbons of vegetation on ditches, corridors, riparian zones, and recreation trails. Yeah, did you get that on my cord? Yeah. Okay. I got 3 minutes left. I'm sorry, I thought I was going to blast through this. The biggest thing to keep in mind is that not just the solar array and what's under it, but the embers that are generated by a lot of these. Thanks, we should have done this before we traded computers. The embers that are generated by surrounding fuels. You can see that this house, even though it's in a forest environment, there's detritus underneath the stairs. An approaching fire has caught it, and the home was lost. And in this home, thank you so much. In this home, you can see that the home is ignited, but the trees around it are still green. Embercast is one of the biggest takeaways from my presentation. With current wind events, embercast can go 3 to 5 miles on strong winds. So if you're surrounded by a lot of these fuels, it's not so much that you are in a cultivated area or surrounded by fields. If a nearby farmhouse ignites and they're 3 to 5 miles and you have embercast and possibilities for fuel transfer, that's your consideration in your solar array. So I have a few minutes left. There's recommended actions. Understand the fire risk of your surrounding landscape. Consider windborne embers. You're still at risk if you're surrounded, if there's structures or ignitable areas nearby. Thin the trees, manage the fuels and branches, and check into your county sheriff if controlled burns or mechanical thinning is a possibility. Structures and areas. This is the perfect message that I wanted to convey. Reduce volatile fuels such as conifers and junipers around your arrays. This is the Colorado Mountain College campus in the Roaring Fork Valley. I lived there for 7 years. And although it's a higher elevation and maybe they have a different precipitation pattern than we do, if you get a running crown fire in the surrounding conifers, then you're generating embercast. If there's structures and the potential for ignition underneath these things, that's where a lot of the risk comes in. Also, remember to store your equipment and machinery at least 20 feet away from an array, preferably on dirt, gravel, or concrete, and consider current weather patterns. Understory fuels is not always grass. These folks have cultivated underneath, but these vineyards will dry out. The solar arrays are tall, but remember that flame heights in cured and dry fuels can double or triple in height depending on conditions. And this is a classic one. These are also not all grass, and you do have livestock in there. Not everything is palatable. Not everything is grass. These appear to me to be invasive mustards that will dry and cure. And I think that Paul will talk more about these kinds of situations later. Here are some reference and resources for you. Dave, it's great that you had education in Oklahoma. They are the masters of understanding agriculture and prescribed fire and wildfire. Here are some really valuable resources. Preparing the Ranch and Farm, Understanding Alternative Energy. This is a Texas A&M reference and one-pager. Management after fire. Okay, well, if this happens, these are really important considerations. Also important, battery energy storage systems and your modeling tools and our references. And thanks.
Thanks much, Gloria.
Okay. Thanks so much. Looking forward to your questions.
All right, we'll bring up Paul. Still with us, Paul? There you are.
I am here.
Right on. Well, this is Paul Scherzinger from Namaste Solar. We'll go ahead and share screen and have at it, friend.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I am Paul Scherzinger. Work at Namaste Solar. I've been working in solar for 10 years or so. And I am here to just kind of give my experience. I've got some actual pictures of fire and solar, or I guess the results of fire around solar, and what I know about it. So, as discussed before, vegetation is around solar is the most significant factor. If you don't have vegetation, there's not much that's going to burn around it. There's some examples here of some pretty tall vegetation that should be taken care of. It's really just mowing it, is what we do on most of our sites. There's not much else to do. on a lot of these. There is also some shading issues just in general for solar. You don't want vegetation shading your panels regardless of the fire risk anyways. You could notice on some of these are fixed tilt ground mounts. And you can notice how close the bottom edge is to the ground on some of these, as opposed to here. This vegetation is just very tall. This is a tracking system that is higher up off the ground, which is generally farther away from the fuel if you keep it mowed. If fires occur, you've got damage here. Um, on conduit and combiner boxes. You can also see the solar panel is burnt on the back side on that left picture. Here is another. These are from the Marshall fire too. That was, I believe, the end of 2001. Um, that came through. There were a couple arrays in there that, yeah, just had too much fuel too close to modules that got fire damaged. Um, Here's another ground mount, just the types of damage that can occur. There wasn't much fuel on here on this site when this fire happened. There are conductors that have been damaged and conduit stub ups that get damaged as well. Um, you can kind of see the fuel breaks here too on this left picture. The fire kind of goes and it pretty much stops at the roadway there. Um, there's not, there wasn't much wind in this situation. You can also see in the background a little bit. Um, there's not enough for it to really, not enough fuel and or wind for it to spread too much. On the right pictures, same site, just a different angle. It did burn quite a bit on this site. But you can also see um, this is a tracker system. The panels themselves farther up the ground, there was just minor burning and melting, really just minor melting of some of the insulation on the module conductors on this site. So not terrible damage. This, however, again, from the Marshall fire, super strong winds blowing soot and ash into inverters. Inverters, the main thing that takes the power from the solar, makes it useful power to put onto the grid. Um, and this is a central inverter that got pretty much packed with soot and ash just through the vents of it. And this inverter did not run again. We had to uh, redesign and put in new inverters along with new module, mostly new modules on this site as well. So again, closer to the ground. These are stub ups where the PV wire home runs go from the arrays to combiner boxes. Some more damage that can happen with the brush on the ground. Even if the site was mowed fairly well, the vegetation maintenance was pretty good. But you still have this sort of damage uh, depending on how much vegetation and the wind. Same sort of thing, connectors for the modules. Um, yeah, just melt together and sometimes melt apart too, just depending on how they're managed. Um, some of the ways they can start, as it was mentioned earlier too, fires on solar arrays are pretty rare. I've when I was looking through this, have examples of I believe it was three fires. Um, and I believe only one of them was caused by the solar. It was a malfunction of the inverter that um, caused the DC conductors um, to melt together and just create a lot of heat, and it finally just ignited the rest of this combiner box actually. Um, and then yeah, and then the box is metal and it just drops molten metal onto vegetation underneath, and then that caused the fires to spread. This is um, another case where the fire started from solar. This was just a connection that was improperly um, installed, which is kind of probably one of the biggest issues, I guess. Just making sure the installation is good to begin with. There's good wire management, good practices, um, as far as using the right materials for for the job you're doing, and yeah, just making sure it's a quality install. The connections are proper and tight. In this case, the on the left there, the connection kind of melted apart a little bit and melted some of the aluminum frame of the module, and that molten aluminum dropped down, started a fire. Um, Similar case here. Um, this the installation was improper, and the whole um, support of the array kind of fell off, and it created a little spark and fire. On the right picture, and that's the thing with the vegetation, it did create a fire, but on that right picture is the just about the extent of the fire. It did not spread very far. Um, so yeah, proper good installation techniques. This happened even about eight or 9 months after the install. There was a part that just ended up getting too close to the brace, and as the tracker system tracked, it put a bunch of pressure on the clasp that held that um, the support bar on, and it just rolled off the side of it and crashed through um, the module, which yeah, you have all that power going through modules. You have that metal right there creating sparks and arcs. So um, just something to watch out for. This is another install. This is a fixed tilt system. You can see it's pretty close to the ground. Vegetation is right there, and it's not good for fire or even for just brush growing up to for solar production. Something to keep in mind if you're designing a system or figuring out where to put your system. You do want it probably at least a few feet, a couple feet, I guess, off the ground. Just another picture too. This is the same site on the right. Um, the panel just kind of go right into the ground, which is not good um, long term at all. Um, we do have a few sites we take care of, agrivoltaics as far as sheep, keeping down the vegetation. There are what about six or so sites that we have this on. Again, fire is pretty rare. But for what it's worth, we've had zero fires on our agrivoltaic systems that we take care of. So and they're mostly test cases right now to just see how effective and cost effective as well sheep can be for vegetation mitigation. And yeah, as was mentioned before too, you can also have zero vegetation. This is, I believe, is the only site we have. This is on the property of Denver International Airport. It's a pretty old site too. But yeah, they've got just rocks underneath the rocks. They on this whole site, they've got a thick layer of like the anti-weed underlayment, and then a bunch of rocks on top. And it's pretty good to keep vegetation down. But honestly, I'm not too sure what it has to do with the rest of the ecosystem. It doesn't seem great to me. But yeah, that's all I have for you now. Happy to ask any question or answer any questions. And yeah, thanks.
Well, thanks, Paul. I mean, you can ask questions too if you want. That's no problem by me.
Thanks.
Um, I thought I'd just follow up with you since we have a little bit more time with you here. Uh,
Sure.
it seemed like you were mentioning the majority of fires that you've seen in solar arrays do not occur because of the PV system. It's something from outside. You also seem to make it sound like fires within solar arrays are fairly rare to begin with. And I imagine you've been around millions of solar panels. Uh, I'm I'm curious, what percentage of all of the solar panels that you've ever been around have you seen be burned?
Um,
That's a hard
that's
one, but
it's a very small percentage. Um, yeah, the biggest one was the Marshall fire. There was a significant amount of damage on all those modules. I think it was um, two arrays, so it was probably about a megawatts worth of modules that were damaged. Um, and again, the Marshall fire not caused by the solar at all, just kind of in the way there. But yeah, that'd be the most for sure. But it's less than 1% for sure. Um,
okay. Um, at this time, I'll invite Gloria and Dave to join us back. And for our attendees, if you have questions, please populate the Q&A. I have a few to get us rolling. But thinking about the Marshall fire, since Paul, you brought that up, and Dave, I'm sure uh, maybe you weren't directly involved with it, but probably heard a lot about it. I'm curious if solar arrays that were burning during the Marshall fire either helped to expand the fire beyond what it would have been, or did it increase its intensity in some way because the solar array got caught on fire?
Yeah, I don't think I can speak to that directly, but I would tell you, no, I don't believe there was anything that was discovered afterwards that any of the solar increased the intensity or helped spread the fire. Mother Nature was doing that all by herself at that time with that particular fire.
All right. Dave, I'll keep going with you here. I had one for you. I've talked to various fire marshals around Colorado at the county level, and a number of them have seemed hesitant as to want to allow for any vegetation whatsoever in solar arrays due to the risk of fire. How would you respond to a peer that expresses these types of concerns to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a it's a legitimate question. I think I think it's um a question that has to be answered, right, to them because there's a couple of things that they're looking at. They're like, well, if a fire did occur, like I think Paul had a really good picture there of that bad installation of that one connection that's going to cause some arcs and sparks and fall to the ground and could start that little fire that he kind of showed there. So that was an outstanding thing that we don't want to happen. But even in that circumstance, I think it's pretty rare, right? I mean, this is not something that we're seeing occur. It's not impossible. It just doesn't occur much. But I think it really goes back down to that vegetation management plan, right? And obviously, if something like the Marshall fire came through, they don't want to involve the solar so it doesn't intensify the fire or help spread the fire. But again, I think for specifically the photovoltaic system being up a little bit higher, and then it comes back down to that quote vegetation management plan and sharing with them about what your intent is underneath this and how that vegetation is being managed, right? In a growing environment, the ground is typically moist, right? To say the word. It's typically more of a damp environment in that sense. And then that the vegetation growing underneath it is typically more green, right? Not, again, it's not impossible, but it does make it more difficult to ignite. And even if some material does start to burn, it doesn't spread as readily, right? And so that's part of when you're in the growing part of the season. So in the non-growing part, what are you doing to manage what's underneath that, right? And I think that's kind of like explaining that this is the purpose of this system to help grow vegetation underneath this but it's a managed vegetation that you're trying to grow to kind of help with your business, everything that your goals are for your farm in your particular area. That yes, this is what we're trying to do. I can't do it without it, right? I have to have the vegetation underneath it, but it's a managed system right here. And I think we're all going to go like, well, what if you don't? And it's like, I can't answer that for them, right? And you can't either. It's like, well, it's my business. I'm telling you, this is what I'm doing, right? I can't, you know, I don't know what to tell you. Is like, this is my farm. This is how we're going to be managing it. So this is what I'm asking for. That's a difficult subject, right? But again, I think respectfully in the code, pointing out, it doesn't say it has to be non-combustible underneath them. It says one says vegetation management plan in a PA1, and the International Fire Code says, whatever I had said it basically said the vegetation part of that, it says
yeah.
vegetative surface, right?
Mm.
So it code allows it, in other words.
Thanks. Just thinking about the vegetation plan and going back to Paul's images of the images of what I saw were weeds that were mainly growing around those initial sites. So that looked like kochia and teasel and some sunflowers to me, without much of a vegetative plan. And when kochia dries up, that turns into tumbleweed, from my experience. Um, Continuing down the vegetation path, Gloria, pass it to you. You mentioned in your presentation that grasslands have a higher fire risk, than the fuel models currently show. I'd be curious if you could discuss the differences in grasslands, or if there's different types of species in grasslands that would be higher risk or lower risk, considering a lot of agrivoltaic systems are going to be grazing systems where it's different types of grasslands.
Yeah, I think a lot of it depends on how managed it is, to Dave's point, how managed it is. And just to tag on to your last question and a question that's posted, the most important vegetation management plan other than simplicity. One of the recommendations I had in our slides was after the weather changes or the season changes, or of course you're managing the crops and harvesting is too. And of course, this depended on the height, but to keep the harvested remnants below 6 inches. one of the things and that was referred by wildfire behavior analyst Jack Cohen, who has done a lot of analyses with ignitions and structures and wildfires throughout the world. One of the big considerations with grasslands is, again, management. Are a lot of these fires starting in unmanaged systems? Or is it that there's larger acreages of grassland that are ignited by more volatile systems like eastern red cedar or unmanaged ditches or riparian areas that are ribbons of ignition? So it may not be just the grassland system, although it could be, because if you have unmanaged highway grasses or things that are what we call ruderal that have come out of cultivation and there's sparks or ignitions or lightning or something, that fire takes off. Wind could be increased. Grassland and shrubland fires can move very, very fast. One of the fun fire quiz questions is how fast can a grass wild, like what's the fastest grassland wildfire, which could be up to 25 miles an hour. Of course, Dave may have better statistics on that, but there has been sagebrush, since that's a fuel model that Dave shared. Sagebrush fires can get up to 40 miles an hour. So that's also consideration. The wind speed, vast tracts, how cultivated is it, and is it in areas that are accessible and available for mitigation or suppression? The other consideration that we have to be aware of all the time is invasives, invasive grasses, especially in the arid Mountain West. And I bet you have your own battles, Byron, with cheatgrass. And the triple threat that is becoming well known is cheatgrass and ventonata and medusa head. That these grasses behave quite differently than our native grasses, and they're called cool season grasses rather than warm season grasses, which are our natives or maybe our cultivated crops are, where they can germinate in the fall or lay dormant in the fall and green up in the fall and stay dormant through the winter, so they're ready to suck up all the spring moisture, which robs it from the native grasses, so that they cure and dry out by June. This year, we're looking at a heck of a different system with the lowest snowpack on record. We may be looking at curing. I mean, I've seen up in my neighborhood, I've seen cheatgrass already heading out. So
Same
heading out means
here.
generating, the seed heads. So, and it's not even May 1st.
Right.
So we may be looking at cured grasses in the beginning of June.
I've been pulling cheatgrass around my driveway that's already gone to seed, which
Oh
blows
my
my
God.
mind.
Yeah. But these things are front and center for all attending land managers. Yeah, we're all overwhelmed, even with my little, I have like 270 square feet, but it's a lot to keep up with in addition to producing and managing your business. But anything you can do to keep those fuels down, make sure that all the infrastructure, flammable infrastructure, wooden fences, equipment, fuel lines, brush, conifers, as much as you can are thinned away. And especially like Dave is saying, well, of course it's moist in the growing season, but it's fall. It's drying, curing, fall, and winter we're worried about. Of course, we have a lot of dread winter. And I have some interesting answers to some of these others, like the hay question. Yeah.
I want to follow up on that one for everyone, and maybe starting with Paul. So thinking of the conifers near solar arrays, I've gone to a handful of counties where county officials and the general public hate the look of solar. They don't want to see it. And so one of the things that they do is create a vegetative screening around the solar array. And if you plant deciduous, then all the leaves fall off during the wintertime and you can still see it. So a lot of counties have been either requiring or solar companies go towards the path of planting conifers within 15 to 25 feet around a solar array, and they will plant them densely because of different regulations for that the counties put. So I'm curious, Paul, if you've seen that at many sites, this vegetative screening, or if you have an opinion on vegetative screening, then we'll pass it on to Dave and Gloria.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of some systems we have that have vegetative screening like that. I can't think of any off the top of my head that even have that. So and yeah, I feel like as long as they're, watered and aren't dried out, can't burn easily, I feel like they should be fine. Um as long as they don't grow tall enough to shade the array. But yeah, I'm not too familiar with those.
So you haven't seen too much of it. That's good to know.
Yeah.
Dave or Gloria, any thoughts on vegetative screening?
I no, I don't have any. I don't really agree with that, I guess. I think it's fine. So, I definitely, don't, the leaves could present a problem as you were talking about where they blow under and do, but no, I don't really have much thought about that, I guess.
Okay. You, you can check in two
I
cents if you like,
guess
Gloria, or leave it there.
I I guess one of my favorite sayings in this business, when people weigh the risks of having lush vegetation or privacy screenings or screenings and lowering wildfire risk, is that people want everything to be the same but better. It's one of my favorite sayings. Um, so people want their beautiful green, lush conifer forests and mountainsides. They get mad when other people build, or yeah, I don't know what county that is that's planting conifers near. And again, like to Dave and Paul's points, it's very rare that we have wildfires and solar arrays, and that's a great thing. And that's wonderful that we're sharing this information now before it's less rare. And given trends in weather and atmospheric events, it's best to err on the side of much more caution and prepare for more Marshal fires and Lahaina's than not. That's what we need to be learning. So if somebody's allowing conifer windbreaks along solar arrays, I would think that would need some visitation at county commissioner meetings with some fire data. Because like you said, it's not just the solar array, it's the embercast, it's the landscape around it.
Thanks. Well, we'll pop over to the questions that are coming up. Dave, you had mentioned a vegetation plan. Are there any particular management practices that you would like to share that you'd recommend?
Well, I don't have anything specific, but I mean, we already talked about the simplicity, and she actually, I think it was Beth, actually said that as well. But so maybe as an example, I mean, we already know that, we're going to be growing, we're going to be managing it, we're tending it, we're watering it, all that kind of good stuff. But, Gloria talked a little bit about obviously plant height equals a flame length as well. Typically double to 3 times that plant height is what we can expect the flame coming off that, right? So even if something like, at some of the pictures that we had shown there, if you're really looking at that and saying, this is what we're going to be growing underneath it, we're going to be maintaining a height of this crop underneath this to this, and my solar array is X high, creating a break if by chance a wildfire came through and was burning my crop up, then we wouldn't really, it'd be minimum involvement in that particular solar array. That's kind of like maybe an example that you could include. And again, I can't, we don't know the circumstances of the fire. We don't know what's kind of going on. But we do know that it should relay the message is that you're very serious and you've given this a lot of thought about what you're doing and a fire safety plan to go along with that. I think the other thing is making sure you include water sources that could be used if they need to be used, like in rural areas, any retention ponds or anything that we could draft off of. Access into those particular areas, right? We can't always get like our larger trucks, but some of the more brush trucks, the type sixes or the type threes that can go off road, can probably go off on pretty much the exact same areas that some of your ATVs and tractors and other farm ranch type equipment, making sure they understand where those are that could be used as part of that if something started going wrong.
Thanks, Dave. Moving on to the best way to communicate fire safety. Gloria, I see you're working on an answer to that. Be curious for everyone to be able to share their thoughts on uh, sharing fire safety with, let's say, general public to solar asset owners or managers. Um, yeah, just thoughts on how best to communicate it.
Well, I mean, I don't think I ever muted again, so I'll just jump right back in here. I guess the one thing I thought of is like, Brian, when you have people out, talk about it a little bit, right? I mean, bring it up as part of what you've done and what you've thought about by developing Jack's solar farm, right? That, hey, listen, this was a consideration, right? Am I creating a hazard for the rest of the community here, or what have I done to mitigate if anything were to go wrong, or if a fire were to move into my particular area, what have I done to help mitigate that particular risk that could involve the rest of the community? So I certainly don't think about like, yeah, we sure hope it's not going to happen. We say like, oh yeah, no, we understand that and we've considered it and we've talked about that with the general public. I think, my message, and Paul was talking about it, is like, hey, the fire cause being originating in the PV system itself is rare. It just doesn't happen that often. It's not impossible. It just doesn't happen that often. I don't think that's really the message, right? I think the message is like, yes, we have talked about it. We considered it. The maintenance that you do on your photovoltaic system to ensure it's in proper operating order, just like any of your other equipment that comes into play. I think that's all really important to know that this particular is not being dismissed in that circumstance.
Paul, would there be anything that you would add when you talk to asset managers around fire safety?
Uh, Not really, just yeah, vegetation mitigation and maintenance, checking to make sure everything's looking good. Um, and just do that regularly.
Fair enough. How about this other question that an anonymous attendee has? Is there a difference in solar panel types in terms of fire risk from bifacial to monofacial, transparent, cadmium telluride, and all?
I haven't really thought too much about that. My initial thought would be no. I don't think that has anything to do with it. The modules themselves don't really cause it. It's the electricity going through the leads. I guess technically, the higher voltage your string is, that probably increase your risk. Um, I would think minimally. The biggest risk would just be installation methods. As long as you're following code and doing things properly, um, that's probably the biggest mitigation. And again, like, yeah, doing this for 10 years, I showed you all the examples of that I have that I know about personally of fires started by the solar array, which is very few. So, yeah, I don't believe that type of module really has anything to do with it.
Thanks. Um, Looks like we're winded down here, friends. Last question for anyone that wants to give it a go. Are there types of agriculture that any of you have found to be more fire safe or less fire safe, particularly under panels?
Yeah, I'd be interested in hearing about like the tall ones, given flame height and wind. You want to let the corn, you don't cure it. Well, you harvest it. I don't know how the machines would differ for harvesting between solar panels, but you want to get the ears off. And then after you get the ears off, it doesn't go right down to stubble, which stubble you're probably pretty good. You're what at like half a foot, maybe a foot high, and the fuel is pretty dispersed. So I would think I would be interested in winter answers or thoughts about winter wheat or stalks, oats, things like grain crops.
The straw residue is what you're talking about. Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, I mean, I was kind of looking for your insight, Brian, on this because I mean, we can talk about Gloria and I could probably talk about, and we could say, yeah, I mean, there's lists out there, there's publications out there talking about, more fire resistant type landscaping vegetation, right? Not fire proof, fire resistant, right? Some that don't have the oils like the conifers and other type of situations in there. Colorado State publishes a nice list of those. City of Boulder has made one. Idaho has also, I think, is kind of where a lot of it started up there. So there's a list, but I don't think too many of them are like crop growing type plants, right? So I don't know if any of those would really be a factor when we're talking about agriculture type situations, right? I mean, I guess they got to grow someplace, but I don't think you're really harvesting those type. You guys are
Yeah.
really harvesting more, right? So I don't think we can really point the finger to like, the vegetation that we consider as kind of like a little more fire resistant or hardened. Obviously, most of our native plants or native where you're at may have adapted more to that, like here in Colorado. But I think it comes back to the management of it. And I think, Brian, I think it comes down to looking at that and saying, during the growing season, we have green growing plants, right? Again, not impossible, but very difficult for fire to start, or more importantly, maybe fire to spread in that circumstance. So then it's all on that off season and what you're managing underneath there at that time, and how are you making that less of a concern or hazard.
I think of exactly what you're pointing out. Like during the off season, whatever residue that you've left out there, that's probably the risk. And I think one of the good practices within regenerative agriculture is cover cropping during the off season so that you still have green vegetation going on during that time frame. So
Oh,
interseeding
that's a
that
good
type of
idea.
cover crop. Yeah, that's what comes to my mind. But
So I have a question about one of the concerns that I saw about having solar arrays was the soil compaction, and that agrivoltaics, the agricultural practices, can offset soil compaction by machines for solar arrays. One of the recommendations that Jack Cohen recommended was make sure that you get the mulch and any dry surface stuff incorporated in the soil before, at the end of your growing season, and don't leave it out, was his main point. So would you have machinery to do that? Would that disturb the porosity of the soil? You're trying to build soil, and then you have to disturb it.
Then
Can you send a machine to run through things?
It depends on what type of agricultural practices that you want to perform. Like the no-till, then you're unlikely to incorporate it back into the ground. Whereas if you are tilling, then it would be.
Yeah.
But
that was one of the main things, is that if don't leave dead stuff on the ground underneath the areas for the winter, was the biggest thing.
Well, folks, I think we've run out of questions, but greatly appreciate you taking the time this afternoon to have a chat with us. This has been recorded. We'll be putting up on our website in the next week or so. You'd be welcome to share it with others. But thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you. It's been great.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Be well.